Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft AI for Good Lab Awards. My name is Magda Balazinska. I'm the director of the Paul G. Allen School of Computer Science and Engineering, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to our space for this, what I think, really exciting celebration. The next revolution in technology has arrived, and it is profoundly changing how we live, how we interact, how we work. It's also changing how we do scientific discovery, how we can go about solving some of the world's most challenging problems. Few technologies have had the same kind of effect and have caught our imagination quite like artificial intelligence did, especially recently. And few technologies hold the same paradigm-shifting potential. And one of those promises is for AI to help address pressing social and scientific challenges right here in Washington State. And Microsoft has a long history of leadership in technology, leadership in research, leadership in AI, but also leadership in philanthropy, leadership in helping Washington State and all of us within Washington State, including supporting academic research at other institutions. The AI for Good program really exemplifies this commitment. So we're all very grateful for what Microsoft is doing for all of us. In the Allen School, we actually often like to say that we pride ourselves in having grown up right here in Seattle alongside Microsoft across all those years. Today we live definitely in turbulent and difficult, uncertain times. So partnerships such as this one, such as the Microsoft AI for Good, are really important for everyone here in Washington State. So thank you, Microsoft. Happy birthday. And also congratulations to today's winners. And again, welcome everyone to the Allen School and today's celebration. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Snapp, and I'm from Microsoft. I'm just thrilled to be here today to celebrate the 50th anniversary and to also celebrate the 20 awardees of our open call. I've been at Microsoft now for 36 years. They put that in the script for me. It was like I was a mere child. But I have seen many different eras of Microsoft, and we're always working to empower people and technology. This is the most exciting time of the entire time I've been with the company. But over the past decades, we've also maintained our commitment to philanthropy. And that's part of the values inspired by our founder, Bill Gates, but also, quite frankly, by his mother, Mary, who served on the Board of Regents here at UW for 18 years, and both of his parents, who were very engaged in United Way across the community. Over the last 5 years, Microsoft and our employees have contributed $1.3 billion to 23,400 organizations across the state of Washington through direct grants from the company, through technology contributions, and through corporate matches from our employees and with their volunteer time. But it's not just that. The state of Washington has also shaped who we are as a company, and the spirit of Puget Sound has shaped who we are as a company. So 9 months ago, we launched the One Future, One Sound initiative to celebrate Microsoft's 50th anniversary by thanking our community for the decades of support they have given us, and to make investments for the years to come. Through the One Future, One Sound initiative campaign, we highlighted 50 local change makers in Puget Sound. And these are neighbors, our emergency responders, groups of our teachers, with grants of $50,000 so that they can continue each to do the important work that they do. And the AI for Good Labs open call grew out of this initiative as well. We're excited to build on the partnerships that we already have with academics, with nonprofits, and with companies in our state by investing in innovative solutions for some of the world's thorniest problems. And that's because this anniversary isn't just about the past. It is also looking forward to build on our collective success, to leverage technology to solve urgent challenges, both in Washington State and around the world. And now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Juan Lavista Ferres, Corporate Vice President and Chief Data Scientist for the AI for Good Lab.
Thank you, Mary. I've been in Microsoft a few years before, but it's an honor to be here with all of you today. As Mary noted, this marks the remarkable milestone for Microsoft, our 50th anniversary. Over the past 5 decades, we have worked to empower individuals, organizations, and community through technology. As we reflect on this journey, we remain focused on the future and the role innovation can play in addressing the challenges of our time. Microsoft AI for Good Lab is dedicated to empower organizations that are doing important work on the grounds in their community by scaling their impact. I like to say that much of our work at the AI for Good Lab begins with a problem and a data set. Many of our solutions are open source, so others can utilize and repurpose them. In January, we announced a call for proposals for groundbreaking AI projects based on our home state of Washington. We received so many proposals for incredible visionary projects that harness the power of AI to drive the progress across sustainability, healthcare, education, among others. The 20 projects we have selected as our awardees all have one fundamental thing in common. They are designed technological solutions to human problems. How do students learn best? How do we protect our environment? How do we distribute resources more effectively? How do we keep older adults in residential facilities healthy? These are some of the questions these projects seek to address. Additionally, and critically, these projects all seek to develop solutions that are tailored to the need of the community in Washington State. Many of the solutions have the potential to be scaled nationally or even internationally to broaden their impact, but they all seek to first impact their own backyard before looking further. The creativity, ingenuity, and heart of these projects move and inspire me and my colleagues. Our AI for Good Lab wouldn't be possible without our partners, and we are truly honored to expand our list of partners here in the home state of Washington. Mary and I have the honor to announce these 20 awardees today. We would love if the awardees could stand when we recognize them, but please hold your applause until the end. So the first set of awardees are solving the problems related to sustainability and resource conversations. So let me start with the list. StockSmart.com at the Washington State University Extension is using AI to analyze virtual fence systems, which will help reduce wildfire risk, enhance wildfire habitat, and better control invasive species. The second one, environmental group Long Live the Kings is tailoring a 3D ecosystem modeling program to Puget Sound using AI, enabling exploration on how changes in the watershed will impact local species and resource management, including wild salmon. The third one, another local environmental group, Deal Waters, is working to transform Washington State water management by providing tools that guide wetlands protection using AI models, testing to increase communities' resilience on climate change. For the fourth one, Washington State University is developing cutting-edge AI models that fuse satellite imagery, weather data, and wildfire simulations to quickly assess the vulnerability of residential buildings in the state. Cornell University Circular Construction Lab is partnering with Seattle Salvage Lumber Warehouse and AR3 Lumber to develop and implement an AI-powered technology to reuse salvaged lumber, reducing waste and emissions while creating local green jobs. The next one is through the Seattle Carnivore Projects, the Woodland Park Zoo will use wildlife cameras and bioacoustic monitoring to collect data from green spaces across the central King County and Bainbridge Island to utilize AI to identify the diversity and density of animals like black bears in urban corridors. The next one, Conservation X Labs aims to develop a multi-species management detection algorithms on smart cameras, systems to create a first-of-its-kind real-time monitoring system for disease in wildlife that can be utilized by veterinarians, ecologists, and conservationists across Washington State. Also, next one, the National Marine Fisheries Services, part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, using remote sensing and machine learning to classify wetlands, improving water management and salmon habitat restoration in the Columbia River Basin. The Information Communication and Technology for Development, ICTD, of the University of Washington plans to monitor wildlife using audiovisual channel on tiny compute devices, fostering a better understanding of the animal population linked to food safety, disease spread, and biodiversity. And finally, in both the sustainability and human services, we have a short video to showcase our next awardee. This next awardee is the Evergreen Goodwill of Northwest Washington to plan to use AI-powered automated donations, ingestions, and cataloging system to tackle the backlog of volume of donated woods, reducing waste, increasing efficiency, and unlocking the opportunities for scale and profitability. So let's see their work in action.
Evergreen Goodwill has been around for 100 years. And the only way that we're going to be around for 100 more is by using AI and the technology that's coming. As we adapt to this new world, we get donated goods from the community, and our process for handling them is very manual, and it's labor intensive. But we take those goods and we use the proceeds from the sale of those for funding our job training and education, which is completely free to anyone in the community. So the reason that we came to Microsoft and the AI for Good Grant Challenge was because we wanted to work on automating that process and making it more efficient. We envision that the product will come in, donated from the community, and then the associate will be able to scan the labels and then use the catalog in the cloud to determine its quality, its condition, so that we can get more optimization out of the items that are given to us. So you can think about it in terms of people, planet, and our profits are all tying together in this social enterprise. We don't have the expertise in-house, and frankly, we would never be able to afford to have people who have this level of expertise. So partnering with somebody like Microsoft just really elevates all the work that we would be able to do and gives us a step up into the world where we need to operate in order to continue to do the good work that we're doing. So we're very thankful and we're excited. We've got a lot of things planned for the future.
So before we go to the next 10, please a big round of applause to the first 10. And now Mary will talk about the next 10. So.
Our next set of awardees is tackling projects related to health, education, and serving the public good. The first one, Verify, aims to develop an AI-powered screening tool to detect pneumonia in older adults living in residential care facilities across Washington state, helping to keep vulnerable populations safe and healthy. Next, healthcare organization Providence and Microsoft Health Futures are collaborating to develop Trial Connect, an AI tool that scans population-level medical data across Washington state to identify patients who qualify for clinical trials that could save their lives. Third, the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation plans to build a global cloud laboratory to examine health locally using satellite imagery, AI, and spatial demography to predict risks like drought and food insecurity to specific populations. Dr. Chris Murray, who just stood, will be sharing more about this important work in our panel. The University of Washington Department of Radiology will refine self-improving large language models that translate radiology reports into patient-friendly language, reducing misunderstandings and fostering better communication between patients and medical professionals. The Institute for Protein Design at the University of Washington aims to make further progress in using generative AI to predict protein structures by developing new specialized open source models that will help enable next generation of therapeutics and biomaterials. Nobel laureate David Baker will join us on the panel shortly. Hello, to share more on this. Washington State University Department of Chemistry plans to leverage geochemistry and large language models to build a publicly accessible data set that will help design effective methods for removing heavy and radioactive metals from the soil in Spokane and Hanford, contributing to a cleaner, healthier environment. And Washington State University is also implementing an AI-powered tool called a Group Argumentation Coordinator that will reduce the burden on overwhelmed teachers and improve students' learning experience in science classrooms across the state, providing real-time support for a diverse set of learners. Washington State University will expand an education tool that's been successfully utilized in middle and high schools across the state, called the Washington Assessment of Risk and Needs of Students, or WARNS, to reduce absenteeism and prevent dropouts among elementary school students by initiating a dialogue in AI, I'm assuming, with students about what they need to thrive in the classroom. And through a partnership with KPMG and Microsoft, Big Brothers Big Sisters Puget Sound developed an AI tool that drastically reduces the waiting period of 100 days it currently takes for kids to find a match, a tool that Big Brothers Big Sisters eventually hopes to use to help kids find mentors faster across the country. And finally, Washington State University is working to develop and deploy an AI-powered multi-agent assessment system to empower rural Washington elementary teachers to design high-quality science assessments, which will enhance accessibility, engagement, and instructional effectiveness. And now let's take a closer look at how this last tool will empower rural teachers across the state.
My name is Tingting Li. I'm Assistant Professor of Science Education at Washington State University. My research focuses on supporting K-12 science teachers and students learning science meaningfully and engagingly. I came to education with a chemistry background. That's why I really love both science and education. The project I'm proposing is under the new context of the next generation science learning. In this case, as we support student three-dimensional learning, so we do need to support our teachers in either designing or implementing these high-quality curriculum materials, especially like the formative assessment. When I talk about the assessment in my project, it's more about assessment for student learning as a driver to support them to move forward. We are very excited that we're gonna kind of collaborate with Microsoft. Their cloud, their computing resources is gonna help us to build the AI-empowered teaching and learning adaptive system, which can allow teachers to either design or adapt custom situational learning activities or assessment for their students. Microsoft is not only focusing on those technological innovation, but also focus on how to use these innovative technologies to benefit the society.
So please, a big round of applause for all of the winners. Now, it's an honor to bring to the stage the president of Washington State University, Dr. Elizabeth Cantwell, to say a few words. There's a few awardees affiliated with the Washington State and the AI for Good Lab. Is excited to be deepening our relationship with the university that is so vital to the state of Washington. Dr. Elizabeth Cantwell is Washington State University 12th president and the first woman to hold the position in the university's 135-year history. Dr. Cantwell came to Washington State University from the Utah State University. Prior to her role at Utah State University, Dr. Cantwell held senior leadership position in research and innovation at the University of Arizona and Arizona State University, as well as the leadership roles at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, at the Oak Ridge and Los Alamos National Laboratories. So please, Dr. Cantwell.
That was blessedly short. Thank you very much. One of the interesting things about being a university president is you become a public person, which is not what we are trained to become if we are scientists or technologists. So I am on day 29. I got here on April 1st. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. This is my first foray to the western part of Washington State, and I hope to see you all more and more often. I wanted to just give some sense of the land grant mission, if you will, and just actually describe it a little bit so that the AI for Good paradigm rings through kind of what I think of as translational AI. and the way that I think you can see from the amazing projects that Washington State University has brought forth. So some context setting. Land-grant universities were created at a time at the very, very end of the Civil War, at the very, very beginning of the translation of the then Industrial Revolution into the parts of the U.S. that had never really seen anything like that. So its purpose was sort of threefold, but of those, it was to deliver education to those that didn't have the elite capacity to get there, so place being important. Second of all, to deliver capacity to the United States to have educated citizenry so that we could actually not get back to the place that we were in the Civil War. And the third was really to take people who were pulling plows themselves or with a donkey or a horse into the productive capacity that the Industrial Revolution had already kind of delivered to factories on the East Coast. And if I don't think I need to go into why that's relevant today, we are as divisive as we ever were, and we are in a new industrial revolution, which promises to at least bring the capacity to split us apart as much as it does to bring us together. So it's no longer this kind of situation for higher ed where we did the thing we did when we got started, and then we became the land grant, and now we're just sort of coasting. We actually have to be very active in technology revolutions like the one we're in, and our job is to be active in a way that allows AI, and very specifically, to be translated to the use scenarios that we pay a lot of attention to, feeding the future. The future of all of, we have agriculture, we have veterinary medicine, and we have a medical school at Washington State University. Our medical school is not like this medical school. It is 100% community medicine, and 95% of the people that we serve are people in rural areas. So when you think about what that means, it means that the number of data points is really small, and it's distributed. It's not a lot. So when you look at these programs, and I'm just going to illuminate why I think they fit into the paradigm that I'm about to talk about, helping rural teachers use AI to personalize education, modeling wildfire risk, advancing precision agriculture, partnering with local leaders to address public health or environmental remediation. Those are all what I think of as applied research. I'll do it in 3. I got the 5-minute warning. So applied research has a specific meaning since the 60s, which is kind of what engineers do. We take amazing science and we turn it into things that work. For us, when I look at the kinds of things that are being discussed in the world of AI research, like interpretability, I actually want us all to think about the fact that translatability isn't just things happen, they get developed, models are created, and then we look at how we can adapt them, how we can use them. It is the translatability is what are those uses and how do they begin to actually inform the development of models. I am not a coder. I'm definitely not a vibe coder, but I do know that the information has to go in both directions, or we actually won't even be putting the right sensors out there. We won't be collecting the right information. We will be in a vacuum. Let me address, because I know it's going to come up and then I'll be done, sort of educational paradigms that we're starting to see, because I think there are translational imperatives. One is baseline fluency, so that means that all of our students, no matter what their major is, need to have fluency when they graduate. We are really at the hairy beginning edges of even being able to define what that is. I think of its AI engineering, really. What is literacy mean in all of the fields that we have? And then systems design, which is really what I'm talking about, when we're thinking about translation and translatability and how that gets defined. So we have to be fairly urgent in acting. Washington is an amazing state in realizing that. There are many people, though, in this state that are far east of here who are going to fall behind really, really quickly if we don't act. So this isn't just a technical challenge, it's a societal challenge. How we address it will make the difference between what the state of Washington does for the rest of the world and what it sort of follows along with. I think you all have a sense that we are economy shapers. But what that means to everybody is really perhaps what it has not meant just to this area here. I encourage all of us to think about places like Washington State University serves. We serve urban and rural areas, but all of them are places where most of our students are first gen. Most of the people that we are educating are people who would not have an opportunity at other places. And then what does it mean for AI in any form that we are working on it to be not just translatable, but to be created for translation? So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cantwell. Those were very thought-provoking comments and one of the best explanations of how land-grant universities came about that I've heard in a very long time. So thank you for that. Now I'd like to invite our panelists to the stage over, well, it's not really a stage, over here. And of course, Dr. Cantwell, feel free to take a seat over there. We're going to be talking about the ways in which AI is helping to shape the future of Washington State and what is needed in Washington to continue to be such a leader in innovation. We have an incredible group of panelists to share thoughts on that, two of whom you've already been introduced to, and two additional from the University of Washington who are using AI for life-saving work and scientific breakthroughs. Dr. David Baker is a new Nobel laureate, professor of, can we, yes, do that? Professor of biochemistry, investigator at Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and director of the Institute for Protein Design at the University of Washington. His lab develops software for protein design and uses it to create molecules that address challenges in medicine, technology, and sustainability. And Dr. Chris Murray is professor and chair of the Health Metrics Sciences at the University of Washington. Dr. Murray is also the founding director of the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, otherwise known as IHME, an independent research institution at the University of Washington that provides rigorous measurement of the world's most important health problems. And now, 1 second, and I'll be with you over there. Okay, we switch to the lav mic. Great, okay, great. I think I'm gonna start with Dr. Baker. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to introduce myself earlier. Welcome and congratulations again.
Thank you.
Your team at the Institute for Protein Design has pioneered new ways to use AI to create entirely new proteins. Can you give us some examples of what sort of the short-term impacts have been, and then a little bit of a vision for the future of this work?
Yes, the first things we've really focused after we learned to design proteins were problems in medicine, and we've been working with really amazing researchers around the world to develop molecules that are very promising for treating cancer, autoimmunity, and infectious disease. Mainly in animal models, we have our first clinically approved medicine made by my colleague Neil King, which is a COVID vaccine. And we have a number of new molecules that are sort of working their way through the clinical development pipeline. In recent years, as the power of our methods has increased, we've been increasingly thinking sort of expanding into sustainability problems like plastic degradation, carbon fixation, methane reduction, methane oxidation, as well as technology, thinking about new ways of sensing and even doing computing.
So I'm going to ask you just a quick follow-up question, and then a little bit of a really quick lightning round for you and what you think about it too, and then I'll ask the next sort of big question to Dr. Murray. And it's a question that you all don't think about too much maybe, but when I'm out on the road, I hear about it all the time, and that is, will AI take the place of scientists? What do you think, Dr. Baker?
Yes, well, it's interesting. So we use AI extensively. We develop AI methods for protein design that are now used around the world. I do not think AI will take the place of scientists. We use the way that we use AI is the way that scientists have used new technologies as they've come about, over the last many hundred years, and I think humans are used to dealing with new technology and mastering them. That said, last Thursday I was in a group of leading AI developers who were all convinced that AI was going to take over the world between 2 and 3 years from now. So there are divergent points of view on this, but my prediction is not only will AI not have taken over the world in 2.5 years, but that scientists will still be doing science, just perhaps with a little bit more advanced tools.
We strongly agree with that position, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Glad to hear about that. Dr. Cantwell, you have a degree in human behavior. What do you think? Do you think AI will take the place of humans? Roughly, broadly?
I don't. But perhaps more because babies and children are taken care of by humans. And I think it's a long, long time before we cede that societal role to machines.
Are you saying that's because the adults...
You're still...
involved in their development as humanoids?
Yeah, so we're raised by humans. So to imagine that science, which I think is largely iterative ideation until you get to some endpoint, is driven by how we're raised.
That's a great, I hadn't expected that answer, because we always talk about empathy, but it's sort of the same thing. Talking about empathy as being a real human trait that you learn from, hopefully you learn from your parents. Dr. Murray, what do you think?
I think there's some things that scientists do which will be replaced. Think about systematic reviews. I think in a pretty short order, we won't have students or faculty doing systematic reviews. They'll be automated. I would think within 3 years, probably that sort of time frame. But I'm an optimist about science, that there'll still be a role for a few humans.
There may not be a role for lawyers, I'm hearing, which was my background. Juan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that every wave of AI, we have had sometimes the illusion that AI will replace everything that we do. Certainly, like every wave of AI, we have technology that has helped us a lot. What we still strongly see AI as a tool for us to become more efficient, as a tool for us to discover more things, but certainly not replace the human ingenuity and humans itself, basically. So yeah, in 3 years, scientists will still have jobs. Computer scientists will still code, and in general, we will use this tool and become much more efficient. But certainly, these will generate more opportunities, and human will still be there for doing majority of the work.
So computer scientists will still code, but they'll be vibing. Basically,
they vibe. It's like there's a lot of discussions today about computer science, and that's why I brought it out. It's like, oh, we will no longer need coding. Like, you still code. The difference is that instead of coding in Python, your instructions might be in human language, basically, which will allow us to have many more developers. Correct. So today, even after 30 years of computer science courses, less than 0.5% of the world know how to code. Now, suddenly, if coding is basically like just writing in English or in Spanish or in Mandarin, suddenly we will have much more code to maintain, which means that you will need actually much more developers in many ways.
That's a great way to think about it. Dr. Murray, I'm gonna come to you next.
David,
sorry, go ahead.
Just one very quick thing. I think another way of putting this as far as science and AI goes is that an enormous part of being a scientist is trying to figure out what questions to ask. And AI is really good at solving problems if you state them very precisely. I think the human part that I see for a long time is figuring out what the questions are.
So maybe there's hope for lawyers after all, is sort of what I'm thinking about that. Okay, Dr. Murray, I'm a little bit familiar with your work because I serve with Bill Newcomb on the Population Health Advisory Board and have just been amazed at the wealth of projects that you have going forward. But can you just broadly tell us how AI helps our knowledge of where populations live? And why is it better than just census data?
So great question, and we are, this is a project that we've been doing with Juan and his team, as well as the satellite company Planet. And basically, we're trying to solve the problem that for lots of risks, environmental risks, access to the internet as a sort of protective factor, sea level rise, environmental change, we really need to know quite precisely where people live. If you live at 40 meters elevation versus 5, it's a very big difference as you think about flood risk, as an example. And strangely, there isn't a good, precise map of where humans live. And we can now do that by combining daily satellite imagery, the processing of that using AI, and then bringing in all the demographic sources. The censuses have a role to play to sort of figure out how many people are in each building. So you figure out where the buildings are, you can update that on a very regular basis, and then you start to put layer things onto that, like where storms are, where floods, where heat and drought will be in the future. So it sort of opens up a new version of what we've always done, which is descriptive epidemiology or risk assessment, but now doing that at this sort of very precise level.
So if we were able to predict that there's going to be a drought, what is the next level? Where does that then take us to do?
Well, lots of governments want to know who's at risk. So who's at risk for drought, or let's say moved into a floodplain. So there's a lot of utility for planning, for emergency response, for sort of strengthening health systems to deliver the services that we require. So for example, if you think about climate change, everyone thinks about infectious diseases, but it turns out that most of climate change is about chronic disease, increasing risk of diabetes and chronic kidney disease and heart disease. And yet the places where that's going to happen, there isn't much investment in how to sort of strengthen health systems to deal with those future problems. So all that sort of risk assessment and just sort of pointing out to local and national authorities where you're going to need extra services is one example of how it's pretty useful.
Yeah, I've been reading a little bit in some of the UN agencies about thinking about these predictions early on being sort of a predictor of conflict in a region, and using it as a way to really help put things in place to, maybe minimize the threat of conflict resolution because it's a resource issue.
There's definitely that stream of thought. The people that study conventional war push back on that and argue that it's overblown. So the PRIO group in Norway, for example, have some interesting papers that argue that may not be such a factor, whereas competition for water could turn out to be a factor.
Yeah, it's so interesting the way he just pushes back a little bit on me, because the reason I'm saying that is because I did a little bit of backgrounding actually on all of you, and I was listening to an interview that you gave on Fox News during COVID. And it was and the Fox News reporter kept trying to say that your data wasn't right and it wasn't good and that sort of thing. And you pushed back and you said, those other people have been pretty much debunked. I think it's basically what you said. Do you remember that at all? Probably not.
I remember Fox News interviews being the more painful of the
Exactly right. Exactly right. So now I'm going to sort of do another interjection here on a broader based question. And that really is this notion of, we say that AI needs to be human-centric. And, we've described 20 different projects that all help humans. So what does it mean to you to say that AI needs to always be human-centric? Juan, do you want to start on that one?
So for us, at the end of the day, we care, like at least this is for AI for Good Lab, basically. From our perspective, we care about impact, and impact for us means impact in humans, whether it's food security, whether it's healthcare in general. We care about helping society, and society basically, like that's the human element. There are scenarios where not necessarily are related to humans at all, like we work in biodiversity, but like at the end of the day, we want to help, like that biodiversity is still part of the human nature in many ways, so yeah.
So I think, Dr. Baker, when I think about your work, are there implications that you think about human-centric and particularly related to privacy of information, or is it so anonymized you don't even think about privacy, or do you have a different definition of human-centric?
Well, I think human-centric would be, AI efforts that are trying to make the world a better place for humans, as opposed to, again, a little bit what I heard about last week, which was sort of AI is just trying to, take over and make the world and the universe better for AI. So, which I had never really taken, I still don't take seriously, but there are a lot of people who do take seriously. So I think, privacy doesn't really enter so much into what we're doing because we're not dealing with patient records. We're not dealing with actual human data like Chris is. When our compounds go into clinical trials, that's already dealt with in the standard way. So I think sort of AI with a human face is AI that's doing things that are good for humans.
Yep. Dr. Cantwell, how about you?
Well, I would sort of turn the question back to what do humans think they need? And then are we actually moving in that direction? We were talking in the green room about how many people are using AIs for their personal mental health, for therapy, that it's a massive uptake. And that to me says people are grossly underserved, that humans are grossly underserved in our capacity to deliver solutions for mental health. So AI is actually pretty easy to, whether or not it's right and whether or not it's helpful, I think is a whole other question. But basically, are we, this is the translatability, are we asking the human population enough now to know whether or not we're even moving in that direction?
About what they need, you mean? Yeah. And how do you answer that?
Well, so, I mean, I do think that is maybe a prime directive for AI. But are we doing it? Or are we creating AI that will satisfy itself?
Dr. Murray, I know that you want to have something to say here.
Yeah. So I co-chair a commission on 21st century global threats to health. And spoiler alert, we've looked at 20 major risks from nuclear war to pandemics and climate change. Only 2 we think in this international commission have a existential risk of essentially wiping out humans by the end of the century. Small probabilities, but it's only 2. Nuclear war with subsequent nuclear winter, and malicious AI. And so if you you get the usual bimodal distribution, zero risk, and then there's like a lot of people that have an appreciable risk of extinction. There's an interesting group of super forecasters. They run these super forecasting tournaments, and they come up with a 6%, totally arbitrary. There's no quantification possible, but a 6% extinction risk from AI. So that's in our list of existential risks. So, but on the other hand, incredible opportunity to accelerate health improvement. So we will be living with this for many years, the fact that there is this potential for misuse and even extinction and incredible opportunity. So I don't know what to make of the super forecasters, but it is what they say.
It actually then raises the question of the companies who are really involved in either developing large language models or Microsoft doing that, but also building out the data sets. What is the responsibility of a corporation to manage the the technology that it's putting out there. And I know that we say people manage technology in different ways, but this is really not quite like a calculator. I really think it's significantly more of an inflection change than a calculator. Juan, what do you think is the obligation of a corporation? I know I didn't ask you this before.
No, first, I want to answer the part of the first question. I think it's important. Behind the scenes, all of these models, no matter how sophisticated these models are just basically like multiplication of matrices, correct? So Excel, full disclosure, doesn't allow to have such a big of a formula, but in theory, you could have a whole model like GPT written as an Excel formula, correct? So we have to remember and understand that behind the scenes, this is just math. There's no agenda. AI doesn't have an agenda wants to conquer the world or something. There's nothing like that. It doesn't mean, having said that, it doesn't mean that people might use it for the wrong purposes, correct? It's an amazing tool, and it might bring amazing benefits, it might bring problems. And I think as a society, we need to work together, like as a corporation, as a society, we need to work together to make sure that we maximize the uses of good uses for society while minimizing any potential use as a weapon. Like my manager, Brad Smith, says, in tools and weapons, any technology, any general purpose technology has always been used as a tool or as a weapon. We need to work together, and there is a lot of responsibility from all the AI companies to make sure that we minimize any potential misuse of this technology. But again, for the record and on the record, there's no necessarily an agenda, AI doesn't have an agenda for killing all humans or anything. It's behind the scenes, it's just math, basically.
So it's not sentient?
No, it's not sentient, and I find fascinating the discussions about sentience, particularly from computer scientists that do not understand what sentient is to begin with. And no disrespect with my colleagues, but I think there's a whole discussion on that. It's no, there's no sentient. It's not going to be sentient. It doesn't mean that it might not be wrongly used. As humans, we might use it for the wrong purposes. And that's the responsibility that we have to make sure that we minimize those type of use cases. So.
Okay. Are you sure you're not a big Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah. No, I just have...
That's another discussion.
I just have to ask this other question, and again, none of this was in the script, you guys, so these guys are totally riffing. But so when it's not sentient, I really get that. Yeah. So how do we square then when we talk about these new agents that are actually going to be like your imaginary friend, and respond to you and make you feel better in some of the use cases that Dr. Cantwell talked about? If that's not sentient, is that just math when it says, oh, I know you must feel so bad today?
I'm going to explain. So what we know now as AI, that is just a subset of AI, that is these large language models. The only thing these large language models are doing are predicting the next word. So today I woke up and I saw a beautiful blue, and I asked the audience it's highly likely that people will say sky, correct? But maybe say blue car, blue bird, correct? The only thing that these models are doing are predicting the distribution of the probability of what is that next word. And once you get the next word, you get the next and the next and the next. That's the only thing a large language model is doing. Once you train it in a huge, large corpus, correct? That is like the majority of the open web. These models need to, in order to try to predict what is that next word in a good way, they need to have a representation of the world, and that brings an amazing power. Much more than we ever thought, correct? We build large language models to predict what was the next word when you were searching, in a search engine, what was the next word, so because that would make it easy for people to search. And we never thought at that point, at least that's my understanding where people were building this, never thought that these models will ever bring us something very useful other than predicting that next word. But once people realize that the bigger the corpus, the bigger the models, the more amount of parameters, these models needed to actually have a representation of the world, and that brings an amazing power. I'm not saying there's no power in these models, huge power. But behind the scenes, that's the only thing they're doing is learning from this huge representation, what is that next word. Okay. So I think in general, it's important to understand how these models work. And basically, once you get that understanding, yes, it's relatively easy to answer it's not sentient. To Dr. Murray here, we as humans, we cannot understand what is sentient. That's part of the problem. We don't understand when we say, are they reasoning or they're not reasoning? It's difficult for us as humans to understand what is reasoning means, basically.
So essentially, they're not sentient, but they do have sentiment.
The sentiment is basically like what they learn from that representation of words in that corpus,
No,
correct?
I hear you,
So they,
but-
they behave like humans because they're trained in human data. People say, oh, he's answering like a human. Of course, because he's trained in the huge amount of human data, correct? So they became really good at answering what a human would answer because they're trained in human data, correct?
Dr. Cantwell,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
struck by the, maybe the counterpoint that regardless of how they're trained, they have the capacity to massively influence humans through whatever dopamine reaction, knowledge of what triggers. If you're using an AI therapist and it says, "I understand your pain," things like that become have the power to not only to manipulate, it goes there to me at least. It is a technology that goes beyond mere math to the capacity to, at very large scale, manipulate human behavior.
I think the risk there is that when people are interacting with this technology, because it behaves extremely like a human, because it's trained on this data, suddenly people will have the illusion that there's a person on the other side, there's a person with an agenda. And it has happened even, it happens with people that understand, sometimes even understand, because it's really good at answering that. But I think it's important as a society, we need to understand how it works, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Dr. Cantwell, I want to come to you next. As you noted, Washington State was really well represented in that list of awardees, which was fabulous. And welcome, first of all, to Washington State. It's so great to have you here. Looking forward to learning more about the work you're doing and will do at Washington State. You're just new into your presidency, as you said, 3.5 weeks. How are you, as a new president, thinking about AI for your researchers and how it's going to also impact the students at Washington State?
I think that, the short answer to that question is we will continuously invite all the stakeholders in our community to not merely comment, but actually to participate in the development of how we utilize AI. On the teaching and learning side, and I think everybody probably knows this, but the power and the thing we should fear is the capacity to build very targeted, personalized learning tools that are targeted to each of you as an individual, because you're neurologically different in how you learn. I mean, down to those very fine levels. But then the power for manipulation is exponentially worse. But I think we will end up going that way because it will end up being more effective teaching and learning.
We've already seen some of those kinds of tools, in terms
very
of
effective.
for earlier students, I think, in learning to read and those kinds of things.
But even in the university setting, it's one thing to sit a bunch of faculty down and say, how are you going to use AI in your classroom? It is entirely another one for the students, young people who have more exposure to that just approach to thinking about things, to tell faculty members what they think the approach should be and how it should be used. And it's another thing entirely to have a bunch of farmers come in and say, these are the things that we need. I mean, so we do a kind of very broad brush approach to how are we all going to do this so that we accelerate our capacity to not just be smart consumers, but also deliver people out of the university setting who are going to be able to help society use or create these tools.
Yeah. Dr. Baker, I'm going to come back to you with a question, a little, not so scientific, but I was recently talking at another very large research institution. I was talking to the provost, and she said that she was having a very difficult time getting faculty to really want to be trained broadly using artificial intelligence. She said, and this is a different area than you, but it was, she said in particular, some of the anthropologists and history folks were saying they needed to physically go out and touch the object to really think about learning about it and what its history was, what its background was. Are you sensing any resistance in your department?
Well, about 5 or 6 years ago, we started appreciating the power of AI methods, and so at that point we had been developing traditional scientific models, and we started developing the AI ones, and it soon became clear they were going to be far more powerful. So I faced a certain amount of resistance by everyone who was an expert in the old models, and they were very reluctant to see them go. It's like you spend 5 years in graduate school, you're an expert at something, and suddenly there's new stuff coming along. But I think people are always resistant to changes in technology. It's always hard to adapt. I mean, change is tough. And so I think what happened in the case of my lab, and I think will happen with, really, the people that you're talking about, is you may be reluctant to adopt new tools and methods, but humans, again, have been doing that for, 20,000 years. And, I think if there's a better way of doing things, that will eventually win out. But it's not that it's not, anxiety causing in the transition.
Juan, I'm going to come to you with a question now. Most of your work is based on partnerships, and all of the awardees are examples of partnerships with Microsoft and probably other entities along the way too. Can you tell us what makes for the best research partnership? And we can talk about trust and all those other things but what makes the best research partnership for the work that you do?
So we are applied researchers, and I say that like Dr. Cantwell mentioned, that is that idea that of course we want to publish the results, but for us it's not enough. We would like to see real world impact, and when I say real world impact, is we want eventually to make this into production, and that's much easier to say than to do. Correct? A lot of projects a lot of problems in the world are solved in a paper. But once you go to production, it's like this is not working, correct? And that's challenging for us. When we look at partners, we think first, are they aligned on the type of problems that are the problems that are trying to solve important for society? Can we solve the problems? A lot of people come up with problems like, yeah, this is awesome, but we're not going to be able to solve it, correct? The third one is there data that can be used to solve that problem? The fourth one is that if there is data, can we have lawyers agree that they can share the data? And that's, by the way, that's one of the most difficult ones. For all good reasons, that's one of the most difficult ones. But eventually, once you get to the last one, is that are we working with the right partners? And if we can solve this problem, could we do the knowledge transfer to that partner so that partner can actually make it to production? And once you go to the funnel, it's actually it goes pretty narrow very fast. Mm-hmm. So for us, when we're looking for a partner, we're looking for people that are solving very important problems, but we're also looking for partners that can eventually make it to production. And that's we feel really good about these 20 awardees because of that. And yeah, it doesn't mean that we're gonna solve all these problems on the record. Some of these problems might fail. We need to be ready for that. But we hope that we will see some of these problems make it to production. So.
Dr. Mary, how about you? How do you think about research partnerships with other corporations? And you actually have a lot of engagement internationally as well. How do you work internationally across both a corporation and governments?
So we, one of our flagship efforts is a thing called the Global Burden of Disease, where we're trying to measure on a hopefully yearly, but COVID made it a little bit slower, outcomes for 1,000 locations for every disease, every injury. And we've built up over the last 20 years now an active collaboration of 16,000 co-investigators in 165 countries. And that's we started small and just sort of grows steadily as people find the product useful and want to get engaged. But maintaining a huge collaboration, by the way, writing a paper where you get 55,000 comments on one draft, which was the last one that we, yeah. That's not an exaggeration. That was the number from last week for one of our papers. It takes a we have a whole team devoted to that sort of partnership relationship, and that also extends to the 60 governments or so where we have governments and corporations, I should say, where we have active collaborations. So what we're looking for is people who have the same shared sense of mission, and where there's something that people working together, it'll be more than us working on our own.
Dr. Baker, how about you? Is your work contained within your institute, or do you work across other parts of UW or with other research groups?
Yeah, it's our work is extremely collaborative. We've had a wonderful partnership with Microsoft that's really enabled us to do a lot of the new AI methods development. And we collaborate both with researchers at the University of Washington, researchers throughout the state, and really throughout the world, because our mission is to try and solve these pressing problems in health and sustainability. And when a graduate student in my group comes to me and says, well, I want to work on this problem, I said, well, the first thing you need to do is find the world's experts in it for us to help us go in the right direction. So I have this model within my group of a communal brain where everybody is sort of interacting with everybody else. When we try and start working on new problems, we try and bring in people from around the world into that communal brain.
Great. And Dr. Cantwell, as a president of a university, how do you think about partnering with a corporation? Does that feel good or weird or?
No, it definitely doesn't feel weird. I mean, we do it all the time in a variety of different forms. I would argue that we probably ought to do more of that. It's been a little bit of a sense of being elite to somehow try and solve problems without the real world, and corporations have that at their heart. They're making money because they've solved a problem, or they've figured out how to develop something that people want and or need or think they want. One way or the other. I have a comment though about partnering. I think this particular grant is really interesting because it targets I'm a big believer in regionality as a starting point for finding solutions to, for instance, sustainability problems, where you're actually now doing something with this grant cycle that focuses on a state that has people who have an affinity for one another for that region, and that reason it's sort of almost clan affiliation, but. I think your chances, I'll be really curious whether the chances of success are higher as a result. Because I do think there are aspects of partnering like that that can allow you to address more global scale or larger scale problems by picking your partners.
Yeah, wisely. Juan, how do you anticipate working with awardees going forward?
So for us, we start when we have these collaborations, and we have collaborated with David and Chris already in some other projects. We establish a cadence with them. We understand the problem. More in the case of Chris, for example, we've been working now on this population mapping. Like the plan is that we are not subject matter experts in the problems that we solve. Our subject matter expertise is AI. We bring to the table AI, we bring to the table compute. There are problems, like David's problem, requires a huge amount of compute. Not all of these problems require that amount of compute, but there are problems that require a huge amount of compute. There are problems that require access to specific data. There are problems, all of these problems are different in many ways. For every project we always have we will not work on a problem if we don't have a subject matter expert on the other side. That's something that for us is very important. So yeah, that's basically like the plan is to establish these partnerships and make sure that we contribute, whether it's compute or whether it's our AI expertise or both, and to this partnership. So
great. So the final question for each of you. You've talked about your specific projects and your particular interest. This is your chance to kind of do your pitch about how AI is going to advance science in the world. What potential you see for that, and what it will take to actually execute, to realize that problem. And you get a bonus, I don't know what, a bonus cookie, I don't know what, glass of wine, if you can apply that to Washington State. Dr. Baker?
Oh, I have to go first?
Easy.
Yes, well, I think in the type of work we do, protein design, AI has already been completely transformative, and I think there's, as I said earlier, there are many problems currently facing humans in in medicine and beyond that I'm quite optimistic that these AI methods will help solve with better drugs, catalysts to carry out reactions that are important to carry out, like oxidizing methane, removing it from the atmosphere. And, this work is going on in Washington State here. We have spun out quite a few companies. I think we're at 21 companies now that are trying to, develop this technology in different ways. So that's hopefully good for the Washington State economy. And we're working as much as possible with colleagues in Washington State.
I love the startup. I'd forgotten to really highlight that. That's great to hear. Dr. Murray, potential execution and a Washington State bonus application.
So, we've talked about the use of AI and processing like satellite imagery to create essentially a new data asset, better data, and that can easily extend into crops and other areas. The other, the second area that we're starting to spend more attention on is just creating research tools. Like I mentioned systematic reviews. I think like lots of groups, we're very interested in solving that problem. We spend an obscene amount of money every year on systematic reviews to support the GBD. But the one that I really want us to do more on is predictive modeling. We do a ton of predictive modeling. We use very traditional Bayesian statistical approaches. And now have started to dabble in neural network models for infectious disease, and I think that there's lots and lots of potential. And I hope to see, AI tools on the, predicting whether it's chronic disease or infectious disease, and at least adding that to our model ensembles in the future. That has relevance in all the places where you want to have a glimpse at what might be coming down the pike in the future, including in Washington. So I get my bonus.
There you go. All right. You just at the last phrase, you snuck it in there. I know you've been here 27 days, but do you have a thought?
I do. I think the application space, the power to truly democratize education so that we are able to, using both technology and AI, so we're able to make the idea of diversity of thought real for a place like this, where we now not just give everybody opportunity, but give ourselves opportunity for input and ideation and thought from everybody. Would be transformative for a state like this.
And it will benefit every single student who goes to school in Washington State, right?
It would.
There you go. All right. Maybe I get the wine. Anyway, one, I want to say, first of all, thank you for your leadership on this project. It's absolutely amazing. It's a pleasure to work with you. Do you have any last words on this topic?
So for us, Washington State, of course, is not only our home, but actually our first project that we had in AI for Good, even before the AI for Good lab was a lab by itself, was working with Seattle Children's Hospital on sudden infant death syndrome. So SIDS is the #1 cause of death in the US and many countries between 1 month and 1 year old. And we worked on that project. That basically was the first project that later on helped us became the AI for Good lab. So for us, anytime that we work in Washington State, for us, it's like there's an extra bonus. So we will always try our best to find projects locally. It's easier, like you said, like you can cross the bridge and meet with Chris or with David. Like it's easier for us. But not only that, like we actually care that this is our home. I do think there's an amazing opportunity about using AI, but not in this sci-fi cases. Like we need to think that a lot of problems that were not solved 3-4 years ago, now we could solve, whether it's part of protein folding, whether it's the work that we're doing on satellite data, whether there's other problems, much more, in many ways, much more basic that are really relatively important. As you likely realize by now, English is not my first language. And as a all the top journals in the world, if you're a researcher, requires not just English, require perfect English. Like as a non-native speaker, you will typically get a note from reviewer number 2, is like, a native speaker should review this manuscript. All right? And if you live in the US and you work in Microsoft, you will have someone like Laura or Kevin here with me, like, that will review it. Like, but for 95% of the people in the world that were not born in a country where English was the first language, they don't have that, and sometimes they cannot afford that. And now suddenly, something like GPT, like a large language model, can help you write manuscripts in a way that, like, you have a perfect editorial. And this is already changing the way non-native speakers are publishing, and it's opening up. Like, ideas are distributed equally around the world. Opportunities to have English your first language are not. And in many ways, this is something that is so basic that a lot of times we don't see. So a problem like that now is being solved. A problem like we live in a world we have 1.3 billion people that live with a disability, 280 million that are blind. Suddenly, like, this technology is helping, and we have some colleagues working in Microsoft that are blind that are using this technology to make a living, to work, to be able to navigate through the world. This technology is already changing the way we work and the way we live in an amazing, very positive way. So I do think that, like, yeah, there will be sci-fi like ideas and Terminator ideas, but we need to focus first on problems that we didn't solve before that now are solved, and making sure that we use this technology for good. So I'm extremely optimistic about the use of technology, not for the future, like it's a present problem, basically. So thank you.
What you all are emphasizing is a collaboration between science and our basic humanity, and will continue. And so I appreciate all of your comments on that. With that, please join me in thanking all of our panelists for this great conversation. And one more congratulations for all of the awardees who, all 20 of them, many of whom are here today. That is just wonderful. Please join us for a reception outside. And if the awardees could just come up on the front really quickly, we'll grab a quick photograph, and then we'll let you go too. Thanks, everybody.